It began the way many quiet stories do, without headlines, without cameras, without anyone noticing. Barack Obama once said that the true test of character is what you do when no one is watching. If that's true, then the man who started walking into Seattle Children's Hospital every Tuesday and Friday proved his character long before the world ever caught up to him. His name, technically, was on every wall in the research wing, carved in gold, printed on grants, whispered in board meetings, but here, in room 214, he asked not to be called anything but Mr. Bill. It had started 6 months ago, when a hospital administrator quietly handed him a file. Teenage girl. Down syndrome. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. No insurance. Single parent. Father working construction jobs. No extended family. Mother deceased. She's smart, artistic, and scared. Bill Gated read it, said nothing. The next day, he paid the bill, not just the first bill, all of it. Prepaid every scheduled treatment, approved an extended therapy plan, covered private transportation, assigned a specialized nurse, and even arranged for art therapy classes in her room. That he didn't ask for a photo, that he didn't want his name on the door, that he simply said, "Let her stay where she can smile." Then, quietly, without announcement, he began visiting, twice a week. No press. No entourage. No publicists, just a man in glasses and a soft gray sweater, who brought puzzle books, watercolors, and one worn-out paperback he never seemed to read. Her name was Sophie. She was 16, with large almond eyes, a soft round face, and the kind of honesty that made it impossible to fake anything around her. She called him Mr. Bill after their third visit, and he smiled so gently when she said it, you'd think it was the first time he'd heard his own name said right. She never asked why he came, and he never offered, but the nurses knew, and the staff knew. They saw the way he entered, like someone who didn't want to be seen. Who sat quietly beside her bed while she painted. Who took her stories seriously when no one else did. Who didn't talk down to her. Who didn't flinch when the chemo took her hair. Who still asked, every visit, "What did you create today?" And Sophie, she waited for him. On the days he came, she asked the nurses what time it was. She picked her favorite scarf. She made sure her markers weren't dry, because Mr. Bill came for her. Not for attention, and when she was in pain, he sat through it. Not to fix it. Just to be there. Once, during a particularly bad fever, she cried out in her sleep. Bill sat beside her for 3 hours, hand gently on hers, saying nothing. The nurse came in, whispering, "You don't have to stay," he replied, "she shouldn't wake up alone." He never missed a visit, never once, until one afternoon, after she'd recovered enough strength to sit up for longer periods, she reached over with shaking arms and pulled him into a hug. That it was clumsy. Unsteady. But full of love. And Bill, he froze for just a second, stunned, then returned the hug carefully, gently, like he was holding something sacred. And that's when the door opened. That it hadn't opened in weeks, and standing there in work boots, stained jeans, and a scowl drawn deep into his face was her father. The moment the door swung open, the room cracked. Sophie's arms were still around him, soft and clumsy, her tiny fingers bunched into the fabric of Bill's sweater. Her face pressed to his chest. Her eyes gently closed, safe. Trusting. And then the voice tore that piece apart. "What the hell is going on here?" Bill didn't turn immediately. He moved only enough to gently release Sophie's arms and step back with care. Her eyes fluttered open, confused, afraid not of him, but of the sound. At the doorway stood her father, thick arms. Dust-covered boots. Face weathered by years of pain and exhaustion. His jaw was locked. His chest rose fast with a breath he didn't know how to slow down. Bill raised his hands slightly, palms out, not in guilt, but in calm. "She was just, I saw what she was doing," the father snapped, stepping into the room, the door slamming behind him. "You think because she's different, you can just walk in here, what, act like you belong? Who are you?" Sophie tried to speak. "Daddy, he's quiet, Sophie," he said, his eyes never leaving Bill. "You don't hug strangers." "She knows me," Bill said gently. "I've been visiting for months." "Oh yeah," the man snarled. "Funny, because I haven't seen you once." Where's your badge? You work here. You some kind of, what, mentor? Volunteer? You just hang around with sick girls. Bill's mouth opened but the words stalled. Not out of guilt, but because he recognized the tone. This wasn't suspicion. It was pain. It was rage rooted in shame. The father looked around the room now, like trying to find proof of what he feared. She's 16, he barked. 16. And you've been hugging her. Bringing her stuff. Sitting here alone with her for months. He turned to the nurse, who had just entered, wide-eyed and cautious. You let this happen, he demanded. You let some old man sit in here with my daughter. The nurse's face tightened. Sir, I think you need to calm down. No, I won't calm down, he shouted. I leave my kid here thinking she's in good hands, and this man, he pointed at Bill, his voice breaking, this stranger is hugging her like he's her damn grandfather. Sophie started crying, not sobbing, but the kind of confused, tight, internal cry that builds in the chest like something sacred has been broken and you're too young to understand why. I like Mr. Bill, she said quietly. The father wheeled around. You don't know him. He helped me. With what? She pointed at the canvas pinned above her bed. A watercolor she had painted with new brushes, in new colors, everything. The father looked like he'd been slapped. That he turned back to Bill, furious. You buy her things too? You think you can buy your way into her life? I never, Bill began. Don't lie to me. The nurse stepped between them, hand up. Sir. He's done nothing wrong. The father stared at her. At Bill. At Sophie, still clutching her drawing like a shield, and then he said it. You touch my daughter again, I swear to God, I'll have you arrested. Sophie gasped. Bill's shoulders fell not in fear, but in grief. The room, once filled with quiet grace, now reeked of accusation, and still, he said nothing. No name, no credentials, no defense, because how do you explain the truth to a man who's already decided it's a lie? Instead, he stepped back, gently picked up his coat, and said only 2 words, I understand. But Sophie didn't, and as he stepped out the door, her voice cracked behind him, please don't leave. The door closed, and this time, no one could open it fast enough to stop what was coming next. The hallway outside room 214 was quiet again, but inside, the storm had only just begun. Sophie sat in her bed, knees pulled to her chest, her favorite blanket crumpled beside her, eyes wide and wet. The soft humming of machines behind her couldn't drown out the sound of her father pacing the room back and forth muttering, clenching his fists, dragging one hand through his unwashed hair as though trying to rip the thoughts out of his skull. He touched you, he said suddenly, turning toward her. Sophie flinched. He didn't. He hugged you, her father snapped, pointing to the empty corner chair where Bill always Saturday. Why would he do that, huh? Who does that? What grown man hangs around a 16-year-old girl in a hospital, huh? Don't lie to me. I didn't lie, she whispered. You didn't say anything. You didn't tell me he was coming here. You weren't here, she said softly, barely audible. That stopped him, only for a second, then the guilt twisted into more fury. Don't turn this around on me, Sophie, he growled. I work. I break my back trying to keep us alive. You think I wanted to leave you here with strangers? She looked down. You think I wanted this? He shouted, arms wide. To find some stranger, some creep sitting here like he belongs? You think that's okay? He helped me, Sophie said, louder this time. He what? He helped me when I couldn't move, she said, voice trembling. He read to me. He sat here when I threw up. He brought me new colors to paint because mine were dry. He listened to me when I was scared. The father's jaw tightened. Yeah, I bet he did. That one sentence shattered something. Sophie's bottom lip trembled. Her eyes filled again, but this time not with confusion, with shame. Because now she didn't know if what she felt had been wrong. She didn't know if trusting that kind man made her stupid, and her father saw it. That he saw what he'd just done, but he couldn't stop himself. I've seen men like him before, he continued, pacing again, voice rising. They hide behind soft words and glasses. They pretend to care. But they don't. They pick the ones no one watches. The ones like you. Like me? She asked, shattered that he froze, realized what he'd just said. Sophie didn't blink. She just stared at him. You think I'm easy to fool? She asked quietly. Because I'm different? He said nothing. Because I don't know things like you do. Her voice cracked. Because I'm not smart enough to know if someone's being kind. The father opened his mouth, but nothing came. You weren't here, she said, her voice sharper now, low and shaking. You weren't here when I couldn't breathe. When I cried and couldn't stop. When I wanted to scream but was too weak to speak. He was. You don't know who he is, the father exploded. I know what he did, she said. That he slammed his hand against the counter beside the sink. The sound echoed. That a nurse opened the door, hesitant. Is everything all right in here? No, Sophie said, not looking away from her father. It's not. The nurse glanced between them. We may need to take a step out, sir. I'm not going anywhere, the father said, breathing heavily. Not until I figure out who the hell that man is. Sophie slowly reached beneath her pillow and pulled out a folded envelope, the one the nurse had left behind when Bill walked out. She handed it to him. That he hesitated, then snatched it, ripped it open. Read the letter, read the name. His hands shook. That he read it again, and again, until the truth could no longer be denied. William Henry Gates III, the very man he had just threatened. The very man he'd accused. The man who had paid every bill, every scan, every test, every single drop of medicine that kept his daughter alive without ever once asking for thanks. That he looked at Sophie, and saw something he had broken. That he looked at the door, and realized what he had destroyed, but still the pride in his throat didn't let him speak. That he crumpled the letter in his hand, and sat in the chair across from his daughter, silent, breathing hard, staring at the floor like it might give him back the pieces of what he'd just shattered. For nearly 10 minutes, no one spoke. The father sat in the corner chair with the letter still crushed in his hands. The room felt smaller, like the walls were listening. Sophie had curled into herself, her face pressed against her blanket, but she wasn't crying anymore. She was waiting, not for her father to speak, but for him to hear. The nurse remained by the door, sensing the weight of what had passed, unsure whether to intervene or trust silence to do its work. Finally, Sophie shifted. Her voice was soft but steady. Why do you hate him? Her father looked up. I don't hate him. You shouted at him like you did. He swallowed hard. I was protecting you. No, she said quietly. You were protecting yourself. That landed. She sat up straighter. Her eyes red, but no longer clouded. You don't come. You don't ask. You don't talk to the nurses. You just come when it's easy. And today, you saw something you didn't understand, and instead of asking me, you got angry. I was scared, he muttered. I didn't know who he was, but I did, she cried out. And that should have been enough. He opened his mouth, but she wasn't done. You think just because I have Down syndrome, I can't feel when someone's good? That I can't tell when someone's kind? She held up the painting she made for Bill, a bright swirl of blues and greens, the word, thank you, written in her own careful lettering. You think this was fake? Her father was shaking now, not from rage, but from the slow breaking of something he hadn't realized was brittle until it cracked. I was scared too, Sophie whispered. But Mr. Bill made it better. Not by giving me things. But by being here when you weren't. He lowered his head, and for the first time in a very long while, he listened. The next morning, room 214 was brighter, not because the pain had left, but because the truth had been spoken. Sophie sat by the window now, coloring again, this time alone. Her father hadn't left the hospital. He had slept on the bench outside her room, head against the wall, unable to face her yet, but unwilling to leave. The nurse came in quietly. There's someone here to see her. Sophie looked up, and in walked Mr. Bill, same sweater. Same silence. His face carried no anger. Just a quiet uncertainty, the kind that asked permission with the eyes instead of the mouth. Sophie lit up. Mr. Bill, he smiled, small and warm. Hey, artist. She stood up, wobbly, and he moved quickly, not to catch her, but to let her know he would, if she needed. she didn't hug him, not yet, they just looked at each other, two people who had shared too much silence for too long to fill it with small talk. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "About yesterday." "You have nothing to be sorry for," he said gently. She nodded. "But I still am." A rustle at the door broke the moment. Her father stepped in. No boots. No shouting. Just a man who had spent the night realizing he had mistaken fear for protection, and pride for love. He stood there for a moment. Then said, voice low, "Mr. Gates." Bill turned. "Yes. I didn't know. I didn't want you to." Her father looked down. "I came in thinking I was defending my daughter. I didn't know I was attacking the man who saved her." "I didn't save her," Bill replied, calm as ever. "She saved herself. I just showed up." There was a pause, then the man took a step forward, hands visibly trembling. "I'm sorry," he said. "No excuses." "No, but." "Just that, I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "But I needed to say it. Not because you're rich. Not because of what you paid. But because I judged the only person who was there for her when I wasn't." Bill nodded once. "Thank you." Another pause, then Sophie did what neither man expected. She walked between them, took her father's hand in one, and Mr. Bill's in the other. She looked at them both, and smiled, and without words, both men knew, the anger had passed. The healing had begun. And she, the girl they both had failed to protect in different ways, was the one now holding them together. 3 days passed, room 214 grew quieter than usual, though Sophie never asked why. The nurses came in with soft smiles, avoided the corner where Mr. Bill's chair used to be, and tried to keep the curtains open a little longer than normal. The light helped, they said, but Sophie didn't want light, she wanted silence that made sense. Not the heavy kind, the kind that sat in her chest like a question. She hadn't seen her father cry. Not when the diagnosis came. Not when the treatment started. But since the day he read that letter, he hadn't looked her in the eye. He slept in the chair near the door, arms crossed, pretending to rest. When she spoke, he nodded. When she laughed, he flinched. She knew what guilt looked like, she just didn't know what to do with it. Then, on the fourth morning, a nurse quietly entered with a small envelope, the kind with no hospital markings, no stamps, no labels. She handed it to Sophie without a word and left. Inside was a single folded note and a ticket. The ticket was for a local art exhibition. The note read, "Dear Sophie, you told me once that colors speak when words can't, that I hope you find a way to show them what you never needed to explain them are. Bill." No signature. No mention of money. Just words that knew her, really knew her in a way her own blood still didn't. She smiled, then folded the note, pressed it to her chest, and finally let the tears come, not because she was hurt, but because someone had seen her without needing to be seen in return. Later that day, her father finally spoke. "I didn't know who he was," he said quietly, staring out the window. "I didn't know what he'd done." Sophie didn't answer. She kept coloring. "I was scared," he continued. "Scared of not being enough for you. Of failing. Of losing your trust to someone else." She looked at him now. "Do you think love is something you have to earn?" she asked. That he blinked. "What?" "You said he bought me," she said softly. "But I'm not for sale. And he never paid for me. He paid so I wouldn't die." Her words stopped him cold. "I don't love him because of what he gave me," she said. "I love him because he stayed. You ran from what scared you. He stayed and sat with it." His eyes filled. "Sophie, I still love you too," she said before he could finish. "But you need to know the difference. Or you'll never change." That evening, as the sky turned orange outside the hospital windows, a familiar car pulled into the side entrance. No fanfare. No media. Bill Gates stepped out quietly, carrying a small box. That he wasn't coming to reclaim anything, that he was coming to return something Sophie had made for him, the drawing with stars around his head. That he paused outside room 214. That he wasn't sure if he'd be welcome, but then the door opened, and Sophie was standing there, hands clasped, eyes bright. Behind her, her father stood too stiff, uncertain. Holding something in his hand. A letter. I wanted to give you this, the father said, voice low. Not because it makes up for anything. But because I needed to say it without screaming. He handed it to Bill. Inside was a handwritten apology, long, raw, clumsy, and real. I didn't know who you were, it read, but that's not the point. I didn't know who I was when I said the things I did. Thank you for showing me the man I didn't realize I'd become. Bill didn't say much. He didn't have to. He simply nodded, placed the box gently in Sophie's hands, and whispered, you gave me this when I didn't deserve it. Now I want you to keep it because you always did. She opened the box. Inside was her drawing, now framed, and behind the frame, a photo, not of Bill, not of her father, just of her, painting completely unaware anyone had captured the moment. That a moment where she was fully alive, fully herself. The father looked at the photo, then at Sophie, and for the first time in years he smiled, not because he was proud of what he'd done, but because, in that moment, he finally understood what she had been trying to teach him all along, that love doesn't arrive with explanations. It arrives when you stay, and some people don't need to be announced, they just need to be there.